Hey everybody! So X-Men Apocalypse has finally been released. And while it was one of my most anticipated films of this year, I have to say I was a little underwhelmed. There were a couple of moments that just really put me off to the film, a lot of inconsistencies, but that just kind of happens a lot with X-Men. It's kind of hard to keep things fluid because there are so many characters they're trying to keep up with, and sometimes, yeah, that's just what happens. But honestly, there were a lot of amazing moments in this film, so I'm gonna go ahead and break down the film and end it with what I thought of it in general. At the beginning of the film, we see ancient Egypt. We see the origins of Apocalypse, and it is just all kinds of crazy. The thing that I didn't like about this, now I really love Egypt and all of this, but the fact of the matter was this. A lot of things weren't explained about him. It was just kind of assumed, and they showed how he was transferring himself to another person's body, another mutant's body, and all of this, and how he was betrayed by some of his subjects and then buried under rock for a very long time. And then we see a scene where Moira McTaggart is in present-day Egypt, and she sees some of his followers bring him back to life. When he is awoken and breaks out of his prison, we see the entire earth shake. Many people throughout the world are feeling this, and they have no idea what on earth is happening. Okay, so let's move on to Eric in this movie. I had a lot of issues with his storyline in this movie. The big thing that bothered me was the fact that we saw him, he got married, he had a daughter, and he's living off in Poland, and things don't go too well, and I just don't know how I feel about that entire thing. It really annoyed me. It really annoyed me because we know that Quicksilver is his son, and they even in the Rogue Cut hinted at Scarlet Witch. I just thought it was kind of pointless. We've seen Eric going back and forth from good to evil throughout the films, and this was just, I don't know. I didn't like it. I wasn't a big fan of this. This storyline really pissed me off. And I think the thing that really annoyed me the most about this is how they focused so much of this film around Eric. And when you have an X-Men film, you need to focus more broadly on all of the characters and not just one. There was such a rich cast of characters in this film that I feel like a lot of them weren't given the proper spotlight they deserved. So to cut things short, his wife and daughter are killed after Eric saves someone in this factory he's working at from being crushed by metal. They approach him and find out he is Magneto, and when he is trying to turn himself over, his daughter's powers develop and she starts to make the animals and stuff go crazy, and they shoot an arrow at her and it goes through both the mother and the daughter, and Eric loses it and kills everybody. Because we haven't seen that happen before with Eric. We have. It's happened many times. Now, I'll get back to Eric when I'm ready to speak about the Four Horsemen, but first, let's talk about when we first see Mystique in this film. Something that really annoyed me in this film about Mystique. We saw her more as Raven the entire film. We saw Jennifer Lawrence's face. We did not see Mystique's face as often as we saw Jennifer Lawrence, Raven's face. I was not happy with this at all. Mystique is one of my absolute favorite characters in these comics, and to see that she wasn't Mystique the entire time was just very un-Mystique-like. And I did not like it. I think they should have changed that, and she should have been Mystique more of the film. I mean, Beast was Beast more often than Mystique was Mystique, and that's saying something right there. That is saying something right there. So when we first see her, we see her go to a mutant fighting ring and she rescues Nightcrawler. And this is where I get mad again. But one thing about this scene that I really liked, we saw Angel fighting Nightcrawler, but before that he defeated the Blob. Now, if y'all remember, the Blob was in that horrible Wolverine film that I will not get into right now because it's horrible and I don't want to talk about it. So moving on. When we first see her, we see her rescue Nightcrawler, and the thing that really annoyed me about this entire thing, because I've wanted to see this on film for such a long time, and it's basically been confirmed that it's not canon by the way this scene played out, but the truth of the matter is this. Nightcrawler is Mystique and Azazel's son, and he's not in this film, and in the franchise, apparently. And this kind of pisses me off. But when he first meets her, one thing that I really liked was that he said, "You're her," and she's just like, she doesn't know how to deal with this hero worship that a lot of the Young Mutants have for her. She is not that type of person, and yeah, she's not cool with it. She just basically drops him off. She wants to get rid of him and get him moving towards a safer place, but then she realizes she needs to go and help save Eric, and then she heads back to Xavier Mansion via Nightcrawler. So let's get back to the Four Horsemen and who Apocalypse chose. It was very interesting seeing how he made his decisions. Now, his first choice was Storm in Egypt. She was about to have her hand cut off for stealing, and Apocalypse rescues her. She then introduces him to the world, basically. She gives him all the information he needs to understand the world, and he basically decides that the world is crap and he needs to redo it and have everyone worship him again. And one thing that I really enjoyed about him learning about the world, it was a very Lilu scene because he had a TV and he just had all this information. He touched the TV and all the information flew into him, and he just knew what he had to do and what was going on with the world and how insane everyone was. So I really enjoyed that scene. It had a very Fifth Element vibe to me, and that is one of my favorite films, so yeah. Now, one of the things that I really loved about this entire scene was when he starts to give more power to Storm and we see her hair turn white, and it is wonderful. I also love the do. I really liked the do on her. On Angel, not so much, because he was kind of rocking a mohawk as well. Now, I'll get to Angel in just a second, but first, let's talk about Psylocke. Psylocke was great, and she was another one of the Four Horsemen. She was chosen second, and I just really enjoyed how she was portrayed on screen. It was beautiful, and I loved it. I loved it. So badass. So awesome. And she was the one who pointed them all towards Angel. And when they found Angel, of course, she was like, yeah, no, he's not gonna work. His wings are all burnt up. But Apocalypse was like, I can fix that. And he gives him metal wings. And I thought that was a really cool scene. I really enjoyed that, how they showed his wings turning to metal. Oh, so awesome. That was an awesome scene. And then they decide to go and enlist Magneto to their cause. And oh, okay, I really enjoyed this scene. Because right as Eric goes back to the factory to kill all of those that reported him, Apocalypse shows up with the other three horsemen and takes away Eric's kill. I would have been pissed. I mean, he didn't seem very pissed about it, but I would have been pissed if I were him. I'm just saying. Like, I was pretty surprised that Eric wasn't more pissed about that, but he just quickly jumps on board to his cause, and oh no, yeah, not good. So now let's jump back to the school and what all happened over there in this movie. Now, one thing that we saw before we saw the school, we saw Scott Summers and his power surface in school, in his regular human school. When we see him brought to the mansion, we see him with his brother, Alex, and it is a wonderful scene. We finally saw Cyclops and Havoc together. It was short-lived, but it was great. I very much enjoyed this, especially when Alex said to Beast, "What happened to the big blue furry you?" And Hank replied with, "He keeps him under control now." I really enjoyed that scene because, as we all know, in First Class, Alex gave Hank the name Beast. Now, let's quickly go over what else happened with everyone in the mansion in this movie. Now, we see Jubilee in this movie, and I really love that they added her. She was perfectly cast, and I just enjoyed every little scene that we got with her. I thought we could have been given a little bit more with her, but that's just kind of what happens when you have such a huge cast. We see Scott, and the first time he meets Jean, it doesn't go too well. He has blindfolds on because he doesn't know how to use his powers yet, and he's a complete ass to her. Yeah, that's great. And then later on, when he meets her without the blindfold on, they mend fences and they start to have a kind of a thing. Just a developing thing, but we see it. We see the spark. It's happening. And Sophie Turner did such a great job as Jean Grey. I loved her as Jean Grey. Another thing we saw was Nightcrawler getting used to everything in the mansion, and him being taken on a field trip to the mall and the movies with Scott, Jean, and Jubilee. It's a great scene. And when they're coming out of the movies, I love that scene because they make the comment that third movies aren't always the best, and it is Return of the Jedi. And I'm just like, okay, Star Wars reference. I love this. This is perfect. Just, yes. Now, as they are coming back, things go to hell at the mansion. Oh, just so bad. So bad. So bad. Now, before we get to that, I have to point out a scene that happened that was so great. We see Charles and Alex Summers go to meet with Moira McTaggart to find out about Apocalypse. They end up bringing her back to the mansion. They find that Raven is there, and there isn't a lot of time to really discuss what all is going down. Things start to move really fast at this point. Really, really fast at this point. Raven basically tells Charles that Eric is in trouble, so they go and get into Cerebro to find Eric. And after they find Eric, they find Apocalypse. Apocalypse intercepts this discussion between Charles and Eric, and oh, it's bad. It's very, very bad. And shortly after that, Apocalypse starts to take over all of the nukes in the world, and they have to figure out how to stop this. So Havoc just destroys Cerebro. And after they get out of Cerebro, things go to complete shit. I mean, they really do. It's bad. Apocalypse portals in with his 4 horsemen, and they take Charles, and Alex dies in the process. They didn't show us a body, but it's been assumed. And there's a huge explosion, and the mansion is destroyed. But this is where I get onto the scene that was probably my favorite scene of the entire film. Quicksilver shows up, and he saves everyone in the mansion. It is all kinds of awesome, and I was jumping up and down in my seat. I was having so much fun with this scene. It was so perfect. So perfect. As if things couldn't get any worse, after all is said and done, right after that happens, Stryker shows up, and he takes Mystique, Beast, Quicksilver, and Moira McTaggart captive. It's really bad. But of course, what I really loved about the scene, Jean makes herself, Scott, and Nightcrawler invisible, and they jump into the helicopter with them. Now, when they get to the location where they're being held captive, oh, something really amazing happens. Something really amazing happens. We see Quicksilver tell Mystique that Magneto is his father, and she's just like, what? And he goes on to try to explain it, and she's just like, dude, shut up. Shut up. It's a great scene. I really enjoyed it. And one other thing that we got to see in this whole thing was when Jean, Scott, and Nightcrawler rescued them, they had a bit of help. And it was Logan, Wolverine. He had the Weapon X headgear on, and it was just, yes. So much yes at that point. I really enjoyed this scene, and I really can't wait for the next movie and the villains that we know are coming. I will get to that in just a moment when I talk about the bonus scene. The next thing we see when all of our X-Men head off to face Apocalypse and save Charles is them gearing up. I love this so much. I mean, it's perfect. And I love how Mystique was very impressed by Hank and that he already had a jet designed and hidden in the mansion for when they could suit up. He had the flight suits already and everything. He was ready. He was ready for a war, and they got to do it. And sadly, after their arrival, his X-Jet didn't survive very long because, yeah, Angel and Psylocke destroyed it. Now, the reason Apocalypse takes Charles is that he wants to transfer himself into Charles's body so that he can have Charles's powers and he can control everything. It is not good, so they all have to save him before the transfer is completed. Nightcrawler is tasked with getting him away while all the others distract the 4 horsemen, and it is quite a task. Nightcrawler can't go into a room that he has not seen, so Nightcrawler is getting lost in this pyramid, and eventually he does find Charles and get him away in time, and then things get even worse, because they will always get worse. We see a lot of great face-offs. We see Beast against Psylocke. We see Angel and Nightcrawler kind of going against each other for a bit, and we see Storm going up against Scott and everybody. It's just, everything is so great, and the best part of this entire thing was when Apocalypse comes out, he captures Mystique, and he is threatening to kill her if Charles doesn't come and surrender himself. Well, he goes into Apocalypse's mind and starts battling him, and it's looking pretty good for Charles for a while. And then Apocalypse starts winning. So then things are looking pretty grim. But then Charles gets Jean to come in and save him. He tells Jean to let go and release her full power. We get to see her go into Charles and Apocalypse's minds and fight them both, and then come out, and we see her like walking on air, and we get to also see some of her Phoenix powers. That was really cool to see. It was visually stunning, and I was screaming a little bit in my seat. I was holding back. I didn't want to annoy everyone in the theater, but I had so much fun with that entire scene. It was great. It was so great. One thing that I really didn't like in this final battle was when Quicksilver got his leg broken and stuff, and there was a scene where Mystique asked him if he was going to tell Eric that he was his son. And he was just about to say it, and he didn't. And I was pissed. I'm still pissed. Like, no. No. It's gonna be the worst kept secret ever. So, all in all, at the end of this final battle, Magneto and Storm betray Apocalypse. Angel is killed, and they defeat him. They all defeat him. It's mostly Jean. Without Jean, I don't think they would have defeated him. I really don't. And I enjoyed this to no end. And then finally, after this, one thing that I want to point out that was really great, when we first met Storm in this movie, she hero worshipped Mystique. She loved Mystique. She wanted to be just like her. And when she saw Mystique fighting against Apocalypse, I think that was really a turning point for her and really helped her choose the right side. So when she finally chooses the right side, it's wonderful. I love Storm, and I'm so glad she turned good in this film and not later on in the franchise. After the final battle is completed, we see the Xavier Mansion finally being rebuilt again, because honestly, in these films, that place just gets destroyed over and over and over and over again. And we get to see it actually being rebuilt by Magneto and Jean. So after that is built, Charles, of course, tries to convince Eric to stay once again, and of course, Eric declines and heads off. Now, one thing that I really loved about this entire scene is they took some lines directly from Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen from, I think it was X2, and it was about, does it keep you up at night wondering if they will come for you and your children? And Charles responds with, I feel a great swell of pity for the poor soul who comes to the school looking for trouble. I love that they took these lines directly. I know I didn't quote them exactly because I can't remember the entire quotes, but I did my best. So after that, we close off the movie seeing the new X-Men in the Danger Room. It is so awesome. And we even get, what I really liked about this, we saw a lot of their costumes. They were really reminiscent to the comic costumes, especially Mystique's. I loved Mystique's new costume. It was great. It was great. And we see them start training, and yes, yes. All right, so let's talk about the after credit scene real quick. We got a big tease for Weapon X and for Sinister, who I assume is going to be the big villain in the next X-Men film. I am so pumped for this. I think it's going to be a brilliant film, and I'm sure it's going to be better than this film. My final thoughts on this film were this. It wasn't the best X-Men film. It was no Days of Future Past. It was no X2. And honestly, it wasn't the best one. It was not the best one. It was not as bad as The Last Stand or that horrible Wolverine movie. But I really enjoyed this movie, and even with all of the problems with continuity, I walked out with a smile on my face, and I'm definitely going to be buying this because it's a great time, and I love X-Men. I love X-Men. I will always love X-Men, and that will never end. I hope y'all enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.